humanitarian crisis.
Heading for Kyiv, satellite images show a 40-mile-long Russian military convoy less than 20 miles away from the city center. We will have all the latest from Kyiv and elsewhere in Ukraine, as well as other key cities around the world, on the 6th day of Russia's invasion. Good afternoon. A Ukrainian Interior Ministry advisor says at least 10 people have been killed and 35 wounded in a rocket strike on the country's second city, Kharkiv. 6 days into the invasion of Ukraine, a Russian military convoy stretching 40 miles has been identified by satellite imagery north of the capital, Kyiv. As global leaders continue to condemn Vladimir Putin's invasion, there has been a rare intervention from Prince Charles, who has labelled the Russian president's actions brutal. In Ukraine itself, resistance remains. In a virtual address to the European Parliament earlier, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, said, "Nobody will break us." Well, Sky News has verified these pictures from Kharkiv, Ukraine's second city, showing a large explosion in the city's central Freedom Square. The video shows a missile striking the city's Region State Administration building. A local leader said Russian strikes hit the building as well as residential areas. Footage obtained from inside the building shows the scale of the destruction. Well, let's take a closer look at how the situation in Ukraine has developed. As we've just been saying, a large explosion hit that regional administration building in Kharkiv's main square this morning. There were also reports of Russian forces shelling the city overnight. In Brovary, on the outskirts of the capital, Kyiv, an airstrike left a military airbase on fire. This morning, there were reports that more than 70 Ukrainian soldiers were killed after Russian artillery hit a military base about 60 miles away in the city of Ochtyak. That's according to the region's governor. Videos have been released showing damage in Chernihiv in the north. Ukraine's emergency ministry claims shelling hit a residential building, a market building, and a kindergarten. And in the south, the mayor of Mariupol told Ukrainian TV this morning that the port city has been under constant shelling and that women and children have been killed. And Russia is reported to have surrounded the city of Kherson and is mounting a serious assault there. Let's have a look now at the latest developments. And as I was saying, Prince Charles has said the values of democracy are under attack in Ukraine in the most unconscionable way, adding, "We are in solidarity with all those who are resisting brutal aggression." The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is meeting his counterparts in both Poland and Estonia today and visiting British troops as he pushes for Western unity on the invasion of Ukraine. The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, says Britain has become the first nation to pass a law involving a total ban of all ships with any Russian connection whatsoever from entering British ports. And the Home Office has confirmed it will be changing the criteria for Ukrainians who can immediately seek refugee status in the UK. Previously, it was limited to spouses, children under 18, but now it includes grandparents, siblings, and adult children. Well, in the last hour, Prince Charles has condemned the invasion of Ukraine as brutal aggression. He was speaking as he attended a meeting to mark Southend-on-Sea becoming a city, a key wish of MP Sir David Amess, who was killed in October.
What we saw in the terrible tragedy in Southend was an attack on democracy, on an open society, on freedom itself. We are seeing those same values under attack today in Ukraine, in the most unconscionable way. In the stand we take here, we are in solidarity with all those who are resisting brutal aggression.
Well, the government has been facing increasing pressure to do more to help those fleeing Ukraine, while in Poland, the Prime Minister announced there would be further support, including sponsorship schemes.
We have always had a tradition of welcoming people in large numbers from crisis areas, from war zones. So what we're going to do is we're extending the family scheme so that actually very considerable numbers would be eligible. As I set out earlier, you could be talking about a couple of 100,000, maybe more. Additionally, we're going to have a humanitarian scheme, and then a scheme by which UK companies and citizens can sponsor individual Ukrainians to come to the UK. So we're doing exactly what the UNHCR is asking us to do, and we will be in the forefront of helping the humanitarian crisis.
And we will hear from the Home Secretary, Priti Patel. She's due in the Commons at about 1:30, so in about 20 minutes. Well, this morning, the Ukrainian president called the recent attack on Kharkiv an act of undisguised terror and a war crime. Volodymyr Zelensky addressed EU leaders in Brussels.
Our country, the Freedom Square, and this is the largest square in Europe, and that's true. This is called the Freedom Square. Can you imagine this morning, 2 cruise missiles hit this Freedom Square, dozens of killed ones. This is the price of freedom. We are fighting just for our land and for our freedom. Despite the fact that all large cities of our country are now blocked, nobody is going to enter and intervene with our freedom and country. And believe you me, every square of today, no matter what it's called, it's going to be called, as today, Freedom Square in every city of our country. Nobody's going to break us. We're strong. We're Ukrainians. Yesterday, 16 children were killed. Again and again, President Putin is going to say that is some kind of operation and we are hitting a military infrastructure. Where are our children? What kind of military factories do they work at? What tanks are they going with? Or launching cruise missiles? He killed 16 people just yesterday.
Joining me live from Kyiv is our security and defence editor, Deborah Haynes. And Deborah, we just heard Zelensky there talking about that attack, the missile strike on Kharkiv. What is the situation in the capital?
Well, there's just been some news being reported by the Reuters news agency, quoting Russian news agencies, saying rather ominously that the Russian Defence Ministry has said that they will strike Ukraine's security services sites in Kyiv. And these strikes are to avoid information attacks against Russia. Were that to be the case, were they to do those sorts of strikes in Kyiv, that would mean hitting the centre of the city, targets in the centre, which is something that hasn't happened so far, and would be a very ominous escalation of a crisis that is in its 6th day and showing no sign of ending. You've got, as well as that, those satellite pictures showing columns of Russian armoured vehicles, including tanks, weaponry, moving towards the capital, about 40 miles long, it seems. Very much ominous for people still in this city. Many have fled. Lots of people hiding in shelters whenever the air sirens go, of those left behind. But as we have seen across the rest of the country, the initial targeted cities were first, including Kyiv actually, the surrounding parts of Kyiv came under attack from Russian forces and missile fire. And initially the Ukrainian forces were able to repel that, to resist that, to such an extent that the Russian side has now seemingly increased the amount of firepower that it launches against its targets. We saw that in Kharkiv. You've been talking through the strikes today. In fact, in that address to the European Parliament, the Ukrainian president said that 2 cruise missiles were fired at Freedom Square in Kharkiv, which is Ukraine's 2nd city. He said that many people were killed. We don't have the final death toll. I think we were reporting earlier that they'd put the initial figure at 10 dead, but warning that many more bodies were feared buried in the rubble. And as well as that, yesterday in the same city, it came under intense bombardment, potentially from including cluster munitions, according to the analysis of experts that have looked at the blast pattern. That's not confirmed, but cluster munitions, an indiscriminate weapon. It's prohibited by many countries. And again, a sign of this increased level of violence that the Russian forces seem willing and clearly able to use against their targets to try to advance their forces forwards in a campaign that Western officials say hasn't gone as fast as planned, but maybe that was because the Russians had miscalculated the resistance they would face, and now, having recalculated in the face of the resistance, upped the amount of lethal force that they are going to be using. And just one final point, you hear all of these fine words, strong language from across the Western world, across the world, condemning the actions of the Russian president, urging him to stop, urging an end to this violence. But regardless of those warnings, regardless of those pleas, and regardless, perhaps most significantly, of this unprecedented wave of sanctions that have now been imposed on the Kremlin and its associates, it's had zero impact on the ground here. The reverse, the level of force on this ground is increasing. There are also concerns about the potential for Belarus to maybe get involved too.
Deborah, thank you. Let's return now to the Prime Minister's news conference in Poland. And he was confronted by an emotional Ukrainian journalist who told him that NATO must do more to protect civilians from Russian bombs. Daria Kalenyuk, who's from Kyiv, called on Boris Johnson for a no-fly zone over Ukraine.
Britain guaranteed our security under Budapest Memorandum. So you're coming to Poland. You're not coming to Kyiv, Prime Minister. You're not coming to Lviv because you are afraid. Because NATO is not willing to defend, because NATO is afraid of World War III, but it is already started. And these are Ukrainian children who are there taking the hit. You're talking about more sanctions, Prime Minister, but Roman Abramovich is not sanctioned. He's in London. His children are not in the bombardments. His children are there in London. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
Well,
this is what is happening, Prime Minister.
Well, thank you very much for your questions, and thank you for getting here today. And I'm glad that you have been able to get here. And look, I just want to say that I'm acutely conscious that there is not enough that we can do as the UK government to help in the way that you want. And I've got to be honest about that. And when you talk about the no-fly zone, as I said to Volodymyr Zelensky, I think a couple of times, unfortunately, the implication of that is that the UK and would be engaged in shooting down Russian planes, would be engaged in direct combat with Russia. That's not something that we can do.
Let's speak to Sky's Alex Rossi. He's in Dnipro in southeastern Ukraine. Alex, day 6, what is the situation like there?
Well, the big fear here, where I am in Dnipro, is that the Russian invasion forces could soon be closing in, coming up from the south, following up the Dnipro River to try to cut the country in half and use this axis really to work further towards Kyiv, but also split the Ukrainian military forces so that they can't resupply, they can't help out to those cities that are currently encircled and almost under siege. Places like Kharkiv to the east of here, Ukraine's second city, that place is getting pretty badly hit. It's quite clear there has been indiscriminate firing, shelling into civilian areas. Certainly, the mayor of Kharkiv is saying that what's happening there is not war, it is murder by Vladimir Putin's forces. Now, we're also hearing pretty bad things about what's happening down in the south of the country, along the coastline of the Sea of Azov, at Mariupol, for instance. We think Mariupol is pretty much cut off at the moment, surrounded by Russian forces. Contacts of mine are telling me that there are There is now shelling, some of it falling in residential areas. When we were there a few days ago, we saw that for ourselves. The indiscriminate firing of Grad rockets into civilian areas, causing huge destruction and harm and death to civilians. So an extremely worrying situation. The country's on edge. People are really very apprehensive about where all this is going.
OK, Alex, thank you so much. We're going straight to the Commons, where the Home Secretary Priti Patel is speaking. Let's have a listen.
Public services. There is no limit on the numbers eligible under this route, Mr. Speaker. Anyone in the Ukraine intending to apply under the family migration route should contact the dedicated 24-hour Home Office line for assistance before applying. Ukrainian nationals already in the UK have been given the option to switch free of charge to a points-based immigration route or a family visa route. Visas for Ukrainian temporary workers in some sectors are being extended so that they can stay until at least the 31st of December this year. As I said yesterday, I've heard some members calling for visa waivers. With Russian troops are seeking to infiltrate and merge with Ukrainian forces. Extremists are on the ground in the region too.
Listen to the statement.
Mr. Speaker, I'll continue, and perhaps the opposite party members, I'll take their questions later on. But I actually do want to emphasise the seriousness of the security situation on the ground, and that is not something that can be discounted lightly at all, Mr. Speaker. Extremists are on the ground, and they are in the region too. And I'm sure if the party opposite wanted a security briefing from our colleagues, we'd happily provide one. But at the same time, I'm very sceptical of how they treat and respect security advice. Given this, and also with Putin's willingness to do violence on British soil, and in keeping with our approach, which we have retained consistently throughout all emergency activations, including that in Afghanistan, we cannot suspend any security or biometric checks on people we welcome to our country. We have a collective duty to keep the British people safe, and this approach is based on the strongest security advice. Mr. Speaker, these measures have been designed to enable swift implementation, and that is the point, swift implementation, without the need for legislation or changes to immigration rules. The Ukrainian people need help immediately, and we are bringing this in place now. As outlined by the Prime Minister earlier today, I can also set out phase 2 of our bespoke humanitarian support package for the people of Ukraine. Firstly, we are establishing an expansive Ukrainian family scheme so that British nationals and people settled in the UK can bring a wider group of family members to the UK, extending eligibility to parents, grandparents, adult offspring, siblings, and their immediate family members. Again, the scheme will be free. Those joining family in the UK will be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months. They will be able to work and access public funds. Secondly, we will establish a humanitarian sponsorship pathway, which will open up a route to the UK for Ukrainians who may not have family ties with the UK, but who are able to match with individuals, charities, businesses and community groups. Those who come under this scheme will also be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months, and they will be able to work and have access to public services. The Home Office will work closely with all our international partners on the ground to ensure that displaced Ukrainians that are in need of a home are supported. My colleague, the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, will work with the devolved administrations to ensure that those who want to sponsor an individual or a family can volunteer and be matched quickly with Ukrainians in need. There will be no numerical limit on this scheme, and we will welcome as many Ukrainians as wish to come and have matched sponsors. Making a success of the new humanitarian sponsorship pathway will require a national effort from the entire country. And, Mr. Speaker, our country will rise to that challenge. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, this is a very generous and it is an expansive and unprecedented package. It will mean that the British public and the Ukrainian diaspora can support displaced Ukrainians in the UK until they are able to return to a free and a sovereign Ukraine. Yeah. We are striking a blow for democracy and freedom against tyranny. Above all, we are doing right by the courageous people of Ukraine. We will help British nationals and their families to get out of Ukraine safely. We will support our displaced Ukrainian friends. We will respond robustly to Russian threats here in the UK. We, Mr. Speaker, will not back down. We will do what is right. And, Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shall the Home Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. People's homes in Kyiv have been shelled, children have been killed, and Russian tanks are rolling in now on Kyiv. And the Ukrainian people are showing immense courage and resolve in the face of a despot and in the face of unparalleled aggression. And we need to do our bit to support them alongside sanctions, alongside the equipment assistance. That also means being prepared to do our bit to provide sanctuary as well. Families are being split up, often fathers and older children staying to fight, mothers, grandparents and younger children leaving to find safety and sanctuary. And many of those families want to stay close by to home. But for those who want to travel to the UK to seek shelter with family or friends and get the support they need at this dreadful time, we must be ready to help, and we must be ready to do our bit alongside other countries, as we have done in generations past, to give sanctuary to those fleeing war in Europe. We have been calling repeatedly on the government to do more to help, and there will be considerable relief that the government has now changed its position and accepted we must do more. And in particular, I am glad the government now appears to have completely changed its policy in response to our calls to help elderly parents and wider family members. And I'm glad that they have listened not just to those in this House, but across the country, and most importantly of all, to Ukrainians and their families. But I have many questions about how this will actually work and how many people in practice it will help. And I am concerned about the way the Home Office has handled this, but those are issues for another day. We start with the family issues. We are very glad to know that Valentina Klimova in Paris can now come to join her daughter, having been initially refused. But can I ask her, she has had to pay around £700 to apply for visas, having been initially turned down. Can you confirm that that money will be refunded to her and that nobody will have to pay if they are seeking sanctuary from Ukraine? The statement also says, that elderly parents, siblings and adult children will now be included in the family visa. Does that include stepchildren? I have been contacted by someone, for example, desperate to get his stepdaughter and granddaughter into the country. And what about a young mum with her children who has left the rest of her family in Ukraine? Can she come and stay with her uncle and aunt? Are uncles and aunts included? Does the sponsoring family member have to be British or have to have indefinite leave to remain? What about Ukrainians here on work visas, on study visas, who've come maybe as lorry drivers or on visitor visas? Surely she is not expecting to turn their families away. When people are fleeing Russian authoritarianism and war, I assume she will not be applying a test based on which bureaucratic box UK residents tick. So can she make a simple commitment now that family members from Ukraine who are fleeing persecution are all welcome here in the UK, no matter what visa their family member here in the UK has? We will give them sanctuary. And what about people who have been given the chance to stay with friends? We know most people want to stay near Ukraine, but what about someone who has left all their family behind, but maybe used to work or study here in Britain? Can they come and get sanctuary? Is there a route for them? If the only route is the community route, I'm concerned that that will take a long time. Has the government considered an emergency humanitarian or protection visa, for example, that could still include all the significant security and biometric checks she has talked about, but could swiftly be done and go broader than family members too?
We're going to leave the Commons. That was an announcement by Priti Patel about Ukrainian refugees who wanted to come to the UK. They've changed the criteria. It is now grandparents, siblings and adult children of Ukrainians in the UK who can seek refugee status. There's also going to be another scheme where individuals will be able to sponsor Ukrainians who want to come to the UK. Let's go direct to Dmitry Kuleba, the Ukrainian foreign minister. He's speaking.
Military assistance will be coming in. And there is an unprecedented level of assistance that we are receiving right now. Finland is a neutral country and they are providing military assistance to Ukraine. First time in history. Last time it happened was in 1939 when the Soviet Union attacked Finland. Since then, and since the Second World War, we all know that there was a different world. Since that time, Finland never provided its weapons to anyone, but it has changed this rule for the sake of Ukraine. Sweden decided to provide military assistance to Ukraine. Sorry, I mixed it all up. Finland did not provide assistance, but Sweden provided assistance to Ukraine in 1939, first time when they were helping Finland. Next, we're not stopping here. Norway approved exceptional decision to support Ukraine, stepping away from this rule of not providing assistance to a country which is not a part of NATO. Luxembourg is providing anti-tank equipment for Ukraine. Neutral Austria is sending helmets and safety jackets to Ukraine right now. We have
the Ukrainian foreign minister there, Dmitry Kuleba, speaking, giving his daily update and just updating us on who has given support within Europe militarily or otherwise. Well, the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said Russia's invasion of Ukraine had united the 27-nation European Union and the NATO military alliance. Let's speak to our correspondent, Laura Bundock, who's in Brussels. Laura, that was quite an extraordinary session of the European Parliament we saw earlier, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, there was a standing ovation for President Zelensky, but before he joined via a video link, there were members of the parliament holding Ukrainian supporting banners, and that applause echoed throughout the entire chamber. It was a really powerful speech. It was impassioned and it felt personal as well. The interpreter even almost breaking down in tears as he spoke Zelensky's words. Speaking on behalf of the Ukrainian people, Zelensky told the parliament, "We have proven our strength. We have proven we are the same as you. Do prove you will not let us go. Prove that you indeed are European." And another round of applause, a standing ovation at the end of that speech. As I say, a very, very powerful message as he had told the MEP sat there of the devastation caused in the last 24 hours with 2 cruise missiles, he said, directed at Freedom Square, killing dozens of people, including civilians. The European response very strong too, wanting to show that they are united, saying that they are an ally, they are a friend of Ukraine, and that they stand with Ukraine. Let's have a listen now to the European Parliament President, Roberta Metsola. Here's how she addressed Parliament earlier.
On behalf of the European Parliament, I condemn the Russian military aggression against Ukraine in the strongest possible terms and express my solidarity with all those suffering and all those killed.
Point of whether or not Ukraine could become a member of the EU. We know the application was submitted. We saw the photo of President Zelensky signing that application. The EU in response has said it has accepted it. It has accepted its application for candidate status. It won't be a fast process, though, but at least for the point of view of Ukraine, it is in play now. Now, a very, very strong speech also from the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, speaking speaking, saying how if Putin had sought to divide the European Union, then he had had the opposite effect. She said, it is a moment where we cannot take our security for granted, reminding the Parliament of Europe's commitment now to these tough financial sanctions, tough economic sanctions too, saying how they wanted to hit Putin, his oligarchs hard, and would be prepared to go further, freezing the assets of the likes of super yachts, of luxury homes, of fancy cars, she said. She admitted that there was a too heavy reliance within the EU on Russian fuel that was in turn paying the war chest of Russia, and that needed to diversify, that needed to change. And she said that although sanctions would come at a cost to Europe as well as to Russia, she said freedom is priceless.
Okay, Laura, thank you. Well, the EU, US and British diplomats have walked out of a UN Human Rights Council meeting that was taking place in Geneva earlier, and that was during a virtual speech by the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. During his speech, Mr. Lavrov accused the EU of engaging in a Russophobic frenzy by supplying lethal weapons to Ukraine. Let's speak to our correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, who's in Geneva. And what else did Lavrov say, Alistair?
Well, he wasn't here in person, so he delivered that speech virtually, as you said, and when he got up to do it, or when he appeared on the screen, I should say, the room was vacated by Western diplomats there in a show of solidarity towards Ukraine. And they went outside the chamber and they got together in a circle and they held together the Ukrainian flag. Have a listen, though, to what Mr. Lavrov did say, albeit to a far emptier chamber than perhaps he intended.
Members of the European Union have chosen a unilateral path of illegitimate sanctions to evade a direct face-to-face dialogue. The purpose of our action is to save the people of Donbass by fulfilling our obligations as allies and to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, so that such a thing will never happen again. This is particularly relevant in light of the fact that this country is being dragged into NATO, that the country is being flooded with offensive weapons, and this is a country that has openly made territorial claims against the Russian Federation and threatened to use force and to acquire military nuclear capabilities.
It's a pretty strong message of solidarity, diplomatic solidarity from the West towards Ukraine there. No remarks about it from Sergei Lavrov or the Russian government. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if they try and spin it to their advantage and describe it as a display of diplomatic rudeness from the West.
Alistair, thank you. Well, joining me now is Arseniy Yatsenyuk. He's the former Prime Minister of Ukraine. So thank you so much for talking to us.
Thanks
I just want to get your reaction to your president's speech at the European Parliament earlier.
Well, I do commend his speech and I do have full respect and confidence in my president, but I have strong respect and confidence in the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian armed forces and Ukrainian men and women in the uniform. Nobody expected that Ukrainians will fight like hell for our country, for our homeland, for our independence. And you know, the time has come when Ukraine decided to apply for EU membership. We expected that this would happen under different circumstances. But at least we believe that the European Union realized that Russia is a belligerent state. Russia is a real aggressor and it is a threat to the free world. And you just showed Lavrov. And I believe that the time will come when Mr. Lavrov, together with his boss, Mr. Putin, will sit behind the bars in Hague, in International Criminal Court.
It was quite something, wasn't it, when your president said that you've had to pay such a heavy price for this unity that we're seeing in the West?
You know, that's unbelievable. Could you imagine that in this century, we are facing an invasion from P5 member from Russia, who actually lied to the entire world that they will never invade Ukraine. Could you just imagine that they are killing innocent people, innocent Ukrainians, for what? That we admire freedom, that we believe in the free world. that we respect human liberties, that we want to have our country independent. So that's not the challenge. That's more. This is the claim. This is an appeal. This is the threat. I beg the free world to help and to save Ukraine. You have to press tougher, stronger sanctions. Russian oligarchs, Russian people, because they supported Putin, they have to realize that they will pay the price. Not only Putin and his cronies, but they who supported Putin in these atrocities against innocent Ukrainians.
We're constantly told that these sanctions that have already been placed on Russia, on the oligarchs, on Putin himself, the SWIFT system, that they are the most severe that we've ever seen. Do you think that they are enough?
We need to look at the results of these sanctions. If the Russian ruble plummets, this is to be a junk currency. If Russian stocks will be a toxic stocks, if Russian enterprises will be an enterprises with no interest overseas, if Russian gas and oil will be banned to sell in Europe and in the world, so this would be the measurement of effectiveness of these kind of sanctions. This is it. The world, the free world, has to wage a financial, economic, and geopolitical war against this bloody Hitler-style aggressor who is Putin. We are fighting with our arms, with the men and women in uniform. Please help us with an economic, financial, and political war against this belligerent state, which is Russian Federation.
Do you think it should be more than that now? Do you think, because the argument is always, well, we can't help them militarily because they're not a member of NATO. Do you think that the world now has a moral obligation to come in there and help you militarily?
I do believe that the world has moral obligation. Because look at this strong Ukrainian nation who has shown an unbelievable resilience, who is fighting like hell. So all these efforts to appease the beast resembled me 1938 with Hitler. Now I want to be very clear that the free world realized that no more appeasement, that Ukraine is fighting for its independence, and the world is really helping Ukraine with a little defensive weapon supply, with the very tough sanctions, with the financial support. But please do more. We are fighting for our independence, and we are fighting for your independence and for your freedom and for your sovereignty. We are fighting for the world without dictators, for the world without crazy presidents, unhinged presidents like Putin.
Mr. Yatsenyuk, you said a moment ago that it's difficult to imagine, or can we imagine what's going on? And for so many people, it is very difficult to imagine what's going on. So can you tell us what you're experiencing where you are and what is happening?
People are united. People are fighting. People are scared. Look at this death toll of innocent civilians. Look at the resilience of the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian army. So we are fighting for our country, for our families, for our land. We are fighting for our future. There is no other way, no other way. We will survive.
I obviously don't want you to say exactly where you are, but in terms of the capital, we're seeing that convoy, a 40-mile-long military convoy, making its way to the capital. What is your worst fear, sir?
Well, I want to be very clear. I am in Ukraine. I am with the Ukrainian people. I do what I can do to help my country and my fellow citizens. As far as I understand, Putin decided actually to seize a number of Ukrainian cities, including capital. And we have to withstand this. That's the reason why we need defensive weapon. We need lethal weapon to support Ukrainian military. So he made a number of miscalculations. He didn't expect this kind of strong resilience. And once again, I still believe, I am confident that we will survive, that Ukraine will win.
How do you feel that we keep hearing about these sanctions and these economic measures that are being put on Russia, the people in government, the people around Putin, and yet still, it's day 6, day 6 of this invasion. That convoy is on its way. We saw Kyiv, 2 cruise missiles on Freedom Square, your president said.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the West has to ramp up sanctions, ramp up pressure to increase support of Ukrainian military. Just save Ukraine and save the world.
Arsenij Yatsenyuk, former Prime Minister of Ukraine, we wish you well. Thank you very much for talking to us. Well, Russia are already feeling the effects of massive economic sanctions and increasing dissent within the country. Let's speak to our Moscow correspondent, Diana Magne. Diana, interesting there to hear the former Prime Minister say we need more sanctions.
Yes, but I think that unfortunately the sanctions are a punishment, but they are not a deterrent. And they are not going to deter Vladimir Putin from doing whatever it is that he wants to do in Ukraine. And in fact, I think that the more he feels attacked by the West, the more vigorously he'll strike back. And that is the unfortunate thing. And listening to Arsenij Yatsenyuk there talking about the fact that the Ukrainians are fighting for their future, which they are, it is also a case that Vladimir Putin has just ripped the future away from the entire Russian public for generations. They will go back in time. There won't be, because of export controls, the kind of technology that their peers in the West will have. They won't be able to have spare parts for their Boeing and Airbus fleets, so they'll have to start rebuilding their Sukhoi jets, which are vastly inferior. Someone will make money somewhere along the way, but for the next 10 years, while they're building up that industry, those planes aren't going to be very good. Or telephones, everybody here, well, not everybody, of course, but lots of people use Apple technology. That'll go. All of these things that people are accustomed to. And, for example, Moscow is an incredibly convenient city. It won't be for much longer. And I'm not sure that the Russian people really recognize at this stage how bad it's going to get. We saw the ruble collapse yesterday, and we have seen lines at cash points, and people will feel it, but they aren't really yet. But they won't be able to travel as much. Their ruble won't buy them anything. Those who have money in sanctioned banks like Sberbank, and that's a lot of people around the country, won't be able to withdraw cash with it abroad. Visa and MasterCard are now stopped. I went into a shop the other day and they said they're not going to be selling any imported goods because they don't know what price to mark them up as. Inflation is going to go up. The interest rate from the central bank has just gone up to 20% from about 7.5 yesterday to try and mitigate the collapse of the ruble. But these are all very dramatic steps. And the officials are saying that it doesn't matter. We had from Dmitry Medvedev, who was once a supposedly liberal-seeming president in his tenure when President Putin stepped aside for him to be president for 4 years. He has been particularly pugnacious recently, and this is what he said today. Economic wars quite often turn into real ones, so you should watch out. From the Kremlin spokesman today, he responding to whether he cared about the sanctions that have been placed individually on him and on so many other officials in this administration. And he said, "We have no assets in the West. We have no accounts in the West. Punish us. We are not scared." And I'm sure that the central bank and the government will try and mitigate the effects of the sanctions. They will build up counter-sanction strategies. But, freezing the assets of the central bank, which has now happened in many countries where those foreign reserves are held makes a massive impact. Russia has had to ask companies to, like the big oil and gas exporters, to sell off 80% of their foreign reserve assets to prop up the ruble because they couldn't use their own foreign currency reserves. This is just the start of what will be long-term economic pain. And even if the elites aren't all that bothered, or certainly the political ones who are speaking out, there are many who are. Mikhail Friedman, one of the biggest oligarchs in this country, has said that war doesn't serve anyone's purpose. He's just stepped down of the board of directors of Alfa Bank. Oleg Deripaska, another famous oligarch, has been speaking out against the war, about the economic problems that will happen. I think you'll have more and more people speaking out. But fundamentally, it is the people who will be affected worse by these kinds of incredibly hard-hitting sanctions, and they will be affected for a long time to come.
OK, Diana, thank you. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, donations flood in for Ukrainian refugees. We're going to be live at a hub in South London next.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'll have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community. Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Bleak. Might all be finished, I don't know.
Donation hubs have been set up across London to gather together much-needed supplies for Ukrainian refugees. Let's speak to Sky's Ashna Hornag. She's in one of those hubs in South London. Ashna, what's happening there?
Well, just 3 days ago, this space was hosting a wedding, and now, look at it, since they put out a plea for donations, they've been inundated, I should say, with hundreds and thousands of items. So many people have been coming here to this club, essentially this community centre in South London, and donating things like clothing, like shoes, and look at the sheer scale of it, almost a mountain of bags everywhere. And as you can see, there are volunteers now, hundreds of them, that have come down just trying to help. They are seeing what is going on in Ukraine, just, thousands of miles away, and they're thinking, what can we do to help? Feeling helpless. And so lots of people are doing things like packing, sorting through lots of the donations. So children's clothes, adults' clothes, shoes, bedding, sleeping bags, and then there's a woman over here doing some labelling. Excuse me, do you mind me asking, when did you start volunteering?
Only today, only today.
What made you want to come and join the effort?
I feel really sorry for the people in Ukraine. And my husband is Ukrainian, he's here. And this is the only thing we can do, is how we can help. We can donate and we can sort out the things.
And people have been donating so much, haven't they? What sort of things are you seeing donating? You're holding gloves here, aren't you?
Everything. Lots of bedding, lots of clothes, some of them very good quality, shoes, hats, anything. There's everything. Lots of toiletries, nappies. We still need medicines. We still need nappies. We still need sanitary towels, sleeping bags, sleeping mats, all this stuff for the army and for people sleeping roughly in Ukraine.
Thank you so much. I'll let you carry on. But as you can see, so as that lady was telling us, they're still looking for lots of new items. They're saying at the moment they're being inundated with older things, but they're saying first aid kits are what they need, rucksacks, but most importantly, practical items really that are going to keep people warm who are fleeing and leaving behind all that they know. This section is for children's clothes. This lady here is just packing up another bag of items, and each one is being labelled. Women's shoes. What else can I see around me? I can see sleeping bags here, men's shoes, but you can see right at the back there, that's actually a stage. That's where on Saturday they had a band performing for a wedding, but you can't even see that. You can see the lights of the stage, but you can see this mountain of bags, of suitcases, of people desperate to help, and people there at the back, they're just chucking items into the back. You really get a sense that people are desperate to help, and this is really all that they can do whilst the fight goes on thousands of miles away.
Yeah, Ashna, thank you so much. Now, a brewery in western Ukraine is determined to help defend the nation against Russian aggression with an alternative kind of cocktail. Usually the producers of craft beers, the brewers, are now contributing to the war effort by producing Molotov cocktails in their signature brew bottles. Yuri Estavny spoke with Sky News earlier this morning.
West Ukraine, where we are, has a long history of fighting the Russians since 1939. And talking about the situation now, there is a high time in everyone's life when you really have to mobilize yourself, to use all your knowledge, all your energy, everything you've lived for and everything you've gained in life, to turn it into making the fall of this empire possible, making the future of your kids better. And this is what we do. We put together our own money. And we started to, we built on our knowledge of chemistry and our experience from 2014 Maidan Revolution to make good quality Molotov cocktails. And this is about the time when you have to do what you can do, and even more when you have to do this.
So, I mean, so locals are coming to help you, your workers are helping you, and you're producing what? How many Molotov cocktails a day are you producing?
Well, we've only been doing this for 3 days because the war is actually like 100+ hours. Yeah, so it's not an established operation in a way. Yeah, first day we did 300 to 400. Next day we did more. So far we are at a small break because we've stocked the roadblocks that require them. Part of them go to Kyiv, but it's not a very transportable thing. So we make them as the need comes. And we have a flood of people who want to donate money for this. We're collecting local currency. We are collecting euros and US dollars to our accounts. And people actually bring us empty bottles, use machinery oil, magnesium powder, and everything. And then we use our own labor in a safe way, because we know how to do it in a safe way, because we are in that kind of food production. And we are renewing this effort actually today. It's the time when it's now or never. the Russian enemy who came to our land has to stop, and we will do everything, all Ukrainians, women, men, all ages, all social statuses, everybody is making everything possible for this to stop and to really turn the situation around. We have already disrupted the plans of the dictator to have a blitzkrieg, and that's already a good win. Now we have to continue fighting. We are doing it not only for us, we are also doing it for Europe, and we are doing it for the whole world, because it's really the base human things that underline this. There is no other way to do. We must be winning this war.
A couple of lines to bring you before we end here. The Russian TASS news agency, Reuters, are saying that they're quoting a source on the Russian side saying that the second round of those Russian-Ukrainian peace talks is planned for March the 2nd. The first round took place on Monday. No real tangible results, but that they had said that they would meet again in the coming days. So TASS news agency, which is Russian, saying a source on the Russian side has said that the second round of those peace talks will take place tomorrow, March the 2nd. And also Italy is moving its embassy in Ukraine to Lviv from Kyiv. You're watching Sky News. Lots more still to come here as Russia invades Ukraine.
Назад, це значить назад ушли, назад! Назад ушли!
Подоляк.